I can tell you this. One Republican senator told me if it was a secret vote, 30 Republican senators would vote to impeach Trump.
That was veteran Republican strategist Mike Murphy on MSNBC earlier today. In an op-ed for the Washington Post, Mike Murphy writes, the easy-to-dodge days for Senate Republicans are coming to an end. Voters deserve stark clarity in the wake of Trump's dealings with Ukraine, and there is one certain way to get it. The Democratic House must impeach the president and force the question on the Senate, yay or nay, on Donald Trump. Joining us now is Mike Murphy, Republican strategist who has advised both Mitt Romney's and Senator John McCain's presidential campaigns. Also with us, John Heilman, co-host and executive producer of Showtime's The Circus. Both are MSNBC and NBC News analysts. Mike, what got you to the point where you want to see these Republican senators called on a vote on conviction of Donald Trump in the Senate?
Well, I think it's the issue that American politics is hanging on, and it's time for clarity. Look, I've been a never Trumper for a while. I thought impeachment would have been a political mistake for the Democrats. Go out and beat them. But this Ukrainian thing is outrageous, and it's going to get worse. Every couple of hours, we learn about more concern. So I think the president has clearly violated his oath of office, and I don't think Republican office holders, as much as they don't like the idea, should be able to answer with essay questions about Donald Trump. The only way to force clarity and find out where they really are, do they want to own Trump and fight his corner despite all this, or do they want to hopefully do the right thing or what might be the smart thing for them in the future politically? You got to have a yes-no vote, and impeachment, as crude of a tool as it is, will force that.
And, Mike, what about Republicans who are in tough reelection situations? Or the other interesting vote is Republicans who are not running for reelection, Republicans who will be retiring. This is their final important vote of their careers.
Yeah, again, I think if this keeps spreading, the whistleblower, it's all coming out in dribs and drabs. But there apparently are witnesses to White House behavior. If this keeps growing, and it does fit the pattern of Donald Trump's behavior to be doing this sort of thing on the phone with a foreign leader, the politics of it could start to change. And the front line of that will be the people like Susan Collins and Cory Gardner, Martha McSally, people who are up in these purple states looking at really tough reelects. And a up-down vote is certainly uncomfortable for them. I'm sympathetic there, but it's the clarity we got to have now. There's a cancer on the Republican Party, and it's time to face it and take a side.
And John Heilman, 218, today's the day. They hit 218 in the House of Representatives. 218 Democrats in favor of the impeachment process. It takes 218 to impeach Donald Trump.
Yeah, and, Lawrence, it's funny. I saw Adam Schiff a little bit earlier tonight, and we're talking about this moment. I think when the history of this is written, the moment when Schiff, along with Nancy Pelosi last weekend, came out and said after all this reluctance that he, like the Speaker, had on political grounds, even though he thought the president had committed high crimes and misdemeanors for a long time, to suddenly shift, and talk about crossing the Rubicon over the weekend was a signal moment. And I asked him, I said, which is it? Did the politics change in the sense that the vulnerable freshmen, these Democrats who are in swing districts where Nancy Pelosi was trying to protect them by not making them do impeachment, did the calculus change because of this egregious behavior, or was this behavior just so egregious that the politics no longer mattered? And that, in the end, is what Schiff basically said. He said, look, I think that the 30,000-foot thing was Democrats looked at this and said, the president of the United States is trying to do exactly again in 2020 what he did in 2016, except this time he's trying to do it as the president of the United States and not just as a candidate. And that, in the end, was just intolerable to pretty much everybody in the Democratic caucus.
And Mike, it's kind of two sides of the same coin. If the offense is bad enough, then the politics of it, the political calculation does change.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think it totally has. I mean, I think it's a pipe dream for the Republicans to think that somehow impeachment will help them, because one of two things are going to happen. It's either going to get bad enough that Republicans are going to start defecting, which will cripple the president, or the Republicans will go into in the Senate will go into a Merrick Garland mode and just stonewall this thing all the way. And the Democratic frustration is going to go absolutely off the charts. And remember, we're dealing with a president with lousy polling numbers here. He is not operating from a position of strength, a position of weakness. The only question is, will the Democrats screw this up by nominating somebody that can change the topic of the election? And this impeachment procedure just staples that question to Donald Trump's head. So I think that actually is a political benefit for the Democrats. Now, the last thing I'd say quickly, I can see a scenario if you're a Cory Gardner or Elizabeth Collins, it's not perfect for you, but you're better with Pence. That helps you change the subject to a dangerous Democrat. You know, even though it clearly Pence will have his own shortcomings, Trump is going to be a trouble factory going forward for anybody in a even purple state.
Yeah, Susan Collins in Maine in what could be a struggling reelection. Go ahead, John.
You know, Lawrence, I was going to say that I agree with everything Mike said, and I think the one other way the Democrats can screw this up is not just in terms of who they nominate, but how do they handle these impeachment hearings? And one of the most interesting debates I hear right now is the strategic question. Do you, as you proceed towards this impeachment inquiry, do you make it an omnibus thing where it's not just about this Ukrainian scandal, but it's also about the obstruction of justice from the Mueller investigation, about the hush money payments in the Southern District of New York, about emoluments, about everything that Donald Trump has done wrong? Or do you try to remain focused in a laser-like way on this particular sin, on this particular crime, on this particular dereliction of duty? And I think what it sounds to me increasingly like the smart argument is the one that says, let's just stay focused on this one thing. Don't load up the sled. Don't overload the sled. And there's going to be a lot of people on the left who are going to want to take on all of Donald Trump's crimes, where I think the smarter play is just to focus on this one thing that basically proves it all, the object lesson here. And if you can win that argument, you can win the whole thing politically.
Well, on Nixon and Clinton, they did not contemplate just a single article of impeachment,
right,
especially because they want to give the other party the chance in the Senate to vote with Donald Trump on 2 or 3 counts, and
right,
then vote against him on one. And Mike, it only takes one.
Yeah, look, I agree with John. Keep it simple, keep it focused on a story people can understand that I think is going to have more corroborating facts, and make that the thing. Don't widen it up so the president's defenders can make complicated subparts of the investigation the way to confuse people about this. Real simple. President using the power of American foreign policy to shake down a vulnerable country to further his own political career. It doesn't get simpler or worse than that.
John Heilemann, who is the Donald Trump who you saw today at the United Nations? I ask you because you saw him, you covered him closely on the campaign trail in 2016, and I mean, you were right in there with your microphones and your cameras. I saw you close to him on the trail. You had a lot of interview opportunities with him. That was a lifeless Donald Trump at the United Nations.
I think deflated, and if not wholly defeated yet, Lawrence, I think you started to see signs of what a defeated Donald Trump would look like. I have rarely seen. I've seen the president much crazier. I've seen him. I've seen him distracted. I've seen him seem addled. I've seen him in a million ways perform poorly. But today he seemed limp and as if, you know, the air had been kind of taken out of him. I keep saying deflated. He looked like a bit of a beaten dog today, and that's a little bit mean to dogs. I think if you start to think about where this could go, that's the Donald Trump I think you'll be seeing more and more as this thing encroaches further and further onto his political capital, as his approval rating falls further and further, as his base finally starts to erode, and I think to Mike's point, when the numbers start to get to the point where Republicans, just doing the straight math, look at Donald Trump and he's more of a liability than an asset, and they start to abandon him, that day will come.
There is still time for the Republicans to find another nominee for president. John Heilemann, Mike Murphy, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.